Hello and welcome back to Agriland's Dairy Podcast, The Dairy Trail. I'm Hugh Harney, Technical Dairy Specialist for Agriland, and I'm going out to different farms across the country to see what's going on in the farm each week. In this week's episode, I took a trip to Ballytor, County Kildare, where dairy farmer Larry Hannon expects to be milking 220 cows at the end of the calving season. Interestingly, Larry talks about he converted from autumn calving and winter milking to fully spring calving. He talks about the costs involved, the new lifestyle, and the challenges it involved. He also delves into his protocols around calving, getting cows out to grass, and the power of spreading early nitrogen. So we're out in Ballytor, County Kildare, where we're joined with Larry Hannon. Larry, there's a lot going on at this time of the year. Look, the weather is looking good for the next week. You've calves out, as you were saying. So I suppose before we kind of get into the thick of the calving season and, before we kind of talk about, getting cows right after calving and getting the calf fed, getting cows out to grass, their dietary requirements, fertiliser and slurry, we're going to be covering all that. But just before, do you want to just give us a quick run through the background of the farm here?
Yeah, we're milking 220 cows. We were a liquid producing farm as well up to 2 years ago. We made the transition across last year, and we can go into that in more detail if you want later on. Not sorry you made the decision. It works well on this farm. We'll calve about 235 this spring. We're about just shy of 70% calved at this stage, so we're going pretty well. Things are looking good. We're out at grass by day since start of calving. Obviously, there's a big push on to have grass as part of our diet to increase and drive our solids produced. So we're working hard on that since cows started to calve.
Yeah, I suppose, Larry, look, there's obviously a big jump from going fully spring calving towards what you were, obviously winter milking, having a winter milk contract and cows calving down in the autumn time. So I suppose, do you want to just talk us through that transition? Because obviously it was a big leap, and it was obviously a big jump for yourself and your family, I suppose.
Yeah, I suppose the first thing we did was we sat down with our Teagasc advisor to go through the financials to see, what was it actually going to do for the business if we made the decision to exit. We did those figures. We had a look at how we would move away from the old system of liquid. We were calving about 40 cows in the last winter that we calved them. We had it condensed down to about 6 weeks from the middle of October to the end of November. So we had quite a compact calving regime at that point. So the transition across for the cows wasn't too hard. We just recycled the cows across anything that was fit to recycle. And at the point then when we were finished the calving for that last autumn, I made a decision to sell all my autumn calved Frisian heifers because the decision was final, and it wasn't something I was going to change my mind on, and it wasn't something I was going to give myself the opportunity to change my mind on. I suppose the other piece of it was, financial readiness to move across to spring milk. We put a lot of thought into how we'd work our way through the year financially, and the I suppose the decision was made that we wouldn't spend any money in that year preceding exit, so that we would build up a reserve to move across seamlessly to the spring milk, and it worked out pretty well. So from that time we moved across until the end of last year, we didn't spend any money, just purely to have that financial stability. We moved across because if you talk to people, the one thing I would say, cash flow is the big thing, big change that you have to deal with on farm. Yeah. So if you plan it and plan your breeding program, and have a compact calving. I had followed the high EBI route for a decade before that, or maybe 15 years before that, and it worked out. It worked out very well. I was very happy. So I was moving to breeding that grass-based, high BI, squarer, hardier cow. So it worked. No, we also had an eye to kilos of milk solids delivered. Now, we were on 570 when we 573 kilos when we moved across to liquid. So we only barely went over 503 kilos last year. So there's a bit of concentration on that now to bring that figure back up this year. Yeah. So to make sure that we get dietary requirements right.
But I suppose, like with your autumn calving herd, their peak milk supply is on silage. Yes. So I suppose just like in terms of a cost control, the difference is with spring calving, you're trying to peak them on the cheapest form of feed possible, which is grass.
Yes.
So that has to be huge for your system.
Yeah, it is. It is. But I suppose the type of cow we have is a high output cow, so she does need to be fed.
Yeah.
You know, there is a requirement there to feed her properly to get what you need out of her. So you know, because of our breeding program, we didn't move to a low input cow. You know, we stayed with the same type of cow, but we just bred it over a period of time.
Okay, very good. And I suppose, like, you know, there's a huge difference between obviously your spring and your autumn calving. But I suppose with autumn calving, Larry, you've money coming in over the winter months. So I suppose, how did you manage that for the first few winters, or how are you still managing it? That, like, do you have a reserve there before you dry off cows, or do you aim for a certain reserve per cow?
Yes, there is a reserve built up per cow there to make sure that there is adequate cash in the system to get yourself through the spring. Because effectively, you have a small check in December. You know, you've none in January and half a check versus when we were in liquid milk in February. So you're really into March, the middle of March, before you have any money to pay any bills. So yeah, and obviously with land rents and everything else coming in the early part of the year, you have to be able to front load that to be able to pay it.
Yeah,
you know.
and you talked about the type of cow. So obviously it's a Holstein Friesian type cow. Would they probably be weighing 600 kilos or 550? Okay, kilos, very good. Yeah, I suppose just talk us through your kind of breeding decisions there and kind of how this type of cow suits your system, I suppose, Larry.
Yeah, well, I suppose it's more about where we came from as opposed to where we are now.
Okay.
We would have had, we were milking 70 cows here, and we would have had the old sort of 100,000 gallons of a contract, you know.
Yeah.
So we had, during that super levy period, what we did was the cows produced more and we had less of them. Yeah. That's the way it kind of worked out. So we ended up getting into a kind of an extreme Holstein cow, you know, and she calved, and there was nearly a celebration when she calved because every cow was difficult, you know. So we've moved away to a much more robust animal that she gets in there, she calves, you know, and she can bounce back from a challenge. Yeah. You know, that other type of cow didn't, and that I was very sure that I wanted to move away from that type of cow because it was just too labour intensive, you know, and just taking up too much time.
And what way did you do that? So obviously with selection of straws then, were you kind of focusing on more fertility rather than your litres of milk, or was it a mixture of kind of looking at fat and protein percentages with a bit of fertility?
Yeah, fat and protein percentages were a key part of it, but we weren't looking for to drive that 450 kilos of milk anymore. You know, we were back at 100 or 150. I still stayed plus on milk. I didn't want to jeopardize that or make a mistake to push that back negatively. Yeah. So we still concentrated on that 150 kilos of milk plus, or anywhere from 100 to 150.
Well, look, litres of milk still push solids, so you have that as well. I suppose we'll get into kind of the kind of calving down the cows. So I suppose you've a rake of cubicles here on the farm. So like, I suppose on the lead up to calving, that transition period for the cow, do you want to just talk us through that from getting them to the period of calving down and then looking after the cow?
Well, I suppose the first thing that we consider is when our due date is. So we work back 42 days from our due date, which happened to be the 9th of December this year. So we, regardless of milk price, we decided the decision was made that we would dry off on the 9th of December. So you have at least 6 weeks for all cows. So that leaves it simpler when they're coming back in. They're getting that adequate time dry. You're not pinching the following year's milk, and you're looking after the cow. And in that early part pre-Christmas, we would have fed a bit of straw in the diet just to condition the cow, because silage was quite good and we didn't want to over-condition them. Yeah. And I found that it worked very well. I've done it for a few years now. I know it's a bit more laboursome, and I look forward to the day when I stop feeding the straw and I can just throw in a few grabs in front of them. You know, it does leave the system very simple and very easy to do. So we look after the cow in terms of that. She's dried off. She gets a teeth sealer. She's out here, and then it's just holidays for her for 6 weeks, and maybe we look after ourselves as well. You know, time to eat the Christmas dinner and sit down and relax and digest it after, as opposed to the liquid milk supplier that's, you know, busy through September, October, getting those cows calved, getting calves ready for sale, and rearing the next bunch of heifers for the following autumn, all over that Christmas period. So that brings more simplicity into the system, which I really like. It's a transformation in terms of the work on the farm. moving away from liquid milk to that spring milk system, because that gives you that few weeks.
Yeah, very good, very good. And I suppose when the cow then calves down, what's her kind of, what are you trying to get into her? Is it in terms of her dietary requirements? Is it out to grass? Is it a bit of silage, or what way do you work it, Larry?
Yeah, actually, when we have a straw bed, so the cows go in on the straw bed when they're within 4 or 5 days of calving, and we actually start to give them the dairy ration, the maize and silage.
Okay.
And they only eat it's small what they eat, but it just transitions the cow very well, and she comes in ready to go. She's good springing on her, nice amount of colostrum, and good to start milking and drive forward. We also put them to grass then as soon as they are calved.
Okay.
So we were out to grass in the middle of January. It's something, when you come from liquid milk, you're wondering how farmers put out cows to grass in early January. But when you have only 6 or 10 or 15 or 20 as it grows slowly, it's easy enough to do.
With a small dry matter intake.
Yes, but it's so important to get that grass into them, in the early lactation, so we can drive that solids in the early lactation, so that's a key focus.
Yeah, very good, very good. Look, we'll get probably into a bit more of the grass in a moment, but just before, I just want to stick towards kind of the calf and looking after the calf. So, is it something that you keep the calf with the cow, or is the calf separate, taken away from the cow straight away, given a bit of colostrum? What way do you work it, Larry?
So when the cow calves, the priority is to get the 4 litres of colostrum into them. So we get the 4 litres of colostrum in with a stomach tube. We tag the calf, we iodine the calf, and obviously we leave the calf with the mother to, for both of them to settle down and the calf to be licked and whatever. So that takes a bit of time. Once that's all settled, then we'll take the calf and move the calf into the calf pens.
Okay.
We don't have individual pens here, and we haven't worked that system. We just put them in pens of 8. And when you're compact calving, that works well. There isn't a big deal in trying to get calves onto feeders, and it's a lot less laboursome as well,
Okay. Yeah, and I suppose then we'll, in terms, look, we're going back to the breeding season now, but I suppose it's all relevant now because cows are calving down and the calf is on the ground. So I suppose, were you using sex semen this breeding season, and have your replacement heifers kind of already calved down, and what's kind of calving down now, Larry?
Yeah, interestingly enough, we used sex semen last spring. 2 years ago we started on that journey. Last year we used 80% sex semen. My target was 50 Frisian heifers on the ground. I got to 47, so I was a bit shy of my number, but this coming season now we'll move exclusively to sex semen. So we are making that move now. You are going to calve. My Frisian heifers were all born in January, more or less. Within the first week of February, all my Frisian heifers were born. So you're going to start that bit calving that bit earlier. So you'd want to adjust forward or whatever you need to, whatever you're happy with. It doesn't worry me that cows are calving in January anyway. But if you want to tighten it up, that would be a consideration. And within, I'd say, 10 to 12 days, then things started to slow down again because we moved across to Wagyu. We have contract Wagyu, so we moved across to them fairly early on. So that break that used to happen around the middle of March was happening in early February, which seemed a bit frustrating, to lose that week that was quieter than you would like it to be. So we had that to deal with, and we've Herefords now in to come to clean up after. So I'm assuming we'll have another break. So we'll have to look at that and see, because if you have that lull for 2 or 3 weeks in the year, you're starting a bit early. It's sort of bringing the calving season out that bit longer. So it's a consideration for anyone, looking at that to see where it goes. I suppose we use the Wagyu. We use them because we have a contract for the sale of them. So we buy the straws and we use the straw and the heifer, and then at 3 weeks then we have a contract for someone to take the calf. This year, obviously, you'd sell anything because there's a fierce demand on calves.
Yeah, there's a great trade, yeah.
But for the last 3 or 4 years, it's been very helpful in the month of February when you're looking to move younger stock, that there's somebody there to come collect them and take them.
Guaranteed money in the pocket, I suppose.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, Larry, we're in the calving house here now. So I suppose I see the cows have collars on, and I suppose that's brilliant in terms of health, rumination, and huge thing, heat detection. So do you want to just talk us through what collars you have first of all, and how they kind of improve efficiency on the farm?
Yeah, we put in the NEDAP collars. They're in their 3rd year now. Initially, we put them in for heat detection purposes. Now, there was nothing wrong. We're about 84% in 6 weeks, so we weren't in a bad place to start. But just thought to take that bit of labour out of it, we put in an Alphaco drafting gate as well. So one to work with the other, so that we could without too much labour involved, that we could utilise the good stock and breed from as many as possible. So we're delighted with the collar and the way it has worked for us. The health was an added benefit to it, and it's very, very helpful. The first job that's done every day when whoever comes into the yard first is to look up and see if there's anything on alert or is there anything that we need to be looking at. So it's a great starting point, And I just noticed actually we're calving now, whatever is it, 3.5 weeks, and the heats are starting to come in very strong already. So it's interesting to see that that's happening.
So it's a huge labour saving tool in the height of the breeding season.
Yes, I know it's revolutionary on the farmyard because it takes it takes all that effort from the owner. Farmer has to be the one to make sure that the cows go and calf because the business doesn't function without it. But this is actually doing the work for the owner, and it saves him or her a lot of time. When they're out farming, that they don't have to spend so much time looking at cows. It used to be a job I love actually trying to do heat detection. But I really love it now that I'm not involved directly.
Yeah. So it's brilliant that way. Yeah. Moving on now, we'll touch on the grass side of things because obviously you're a good grass farmer. You're trying to get them out. You're trying to get them out early and I suppose maximise their dry matter intake. And I suppose at this time of the year that's the main thing, and try and drive on their proteins and drive on their solids. So I suppose, do you want to just talk us through how you manage that in the spring?
Yeah, well, look at as the calf, we'll put them out. Sure, it's very simple when you start because you've only a small number and you give them an allocation. I mean, we're all looking to get to the 8th or 10th of February. We used to talk about sort of the end of March, but I found that was pushing the thing too far because you got into that second round and you just hadn't got the covers required, and then that affected fat. So you had a kind of a fat crash on the second rotation. So the idea is you get out early, get to graze early, because grazed grass grows grass, and grass grows grass. So you need to keep those two things in mind. So we're trying to hit for the 8th to 10th of April, and we're trying to get grass grazed as early as possible. So we're kind of looking at that 6-week period to try and work back from there to see how we're going to graze the farm.
Yes, okay. And look, you've a slightly bigger cow here, so like you're probably at 16 kgs of dry matter intake at the minute.
No, we'd be allowing for 20 actually here. Yeah. We'd allow for 20 because we want to make sure that the cow gets fed properly on the good day as well as the bad weather day. But we haven't had many, maybe 3 days so far that we couldn't get out to grass at any stage. So it's a key focus to keep them out.
Okay. And just in terms of allocations, then do you work off your pasture base, or what way do you work that?
We use pasture base here, so we do our grass walks and we work off pasture base on our allowance there.
Yeah, and I suppose with allocations, I suppose there is that kind of trial and error. So I suppose sometimes you could let them out and maybe there's not enough grass there, but that's all right. You just allocate them a bit more and go by.
I think experience, which I'd nearly know the farm now. I'd nearly know where to put the wire at this stage, because of just the years that I'm at it, so the experience that I've seen over the years. And it was a great challenge in my earlier days of, the abolition of milk quota and the excitement around that and trying to get the grass earlier. So there was a fierce competitive drive amongst our peers to try and improve standards, and because we kind of got to understand that if you want to make money and you want to produce milk solids, you need grass in the diet. So so it became it. So I suppose I've really taken a keen interest on accessibility, have good water access, have multiple gaps, all that sort of thing. Helps.
And would at this time of the year would you be spur roadways or back fences or?
We've fairly good road network now built up over the years and fairly good water, fair amount of water troughs. The water troughs were initially put in for when we were milking 100 cows, so there's lots of water troughs around.
Okay, very good. I suppose you were saying to me before we got on that you've a bit of protected urea out. Am I right in saying? Yes. So you tried to get out about 33% of your allocation for February and March in February.
Yeah.
And then another 2/3 in March. And like studies show that actually has a serious response for grass. Yeah. So do you want to just talk us through that?
Yeah, I suppose we've moved away from that early spreading in sort of the middle of January. Yeah. We all were at that 10, 12 years ago, and I could never see the benefit of it as such, but I was afraid not to do it in case there was a year that I could get a benefit from it. Yeah. So, I mean, we all know now in the new reality that that's not the right way to go about it. So we target our slurry, I suppose, once the open period starts. We used to go do the whole farm and try and empty the store. Now we have taken a different attitude and we'll start and we'll do 1/3 of the farm in the early part or in the middle part of to the late part of January. And then we will come on then maybe a week or 10 days later and do another 1/3 of the farm.
Okay.
And then at that stage, then we will nearly go and do a half a bag on anywhere that hasn't got it. You know, do a half a bag of protected urea. We put out in that early middle of February, so that the whole farm now at this stage has got slurry or urea.
Okay.
And the part that hasn't got the slurry yet, we'll come back at that now, and we'll get 2,000 gallons on that in the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah, and then in terms of urea, what's the plan for the next month, I suppose?
Yeah, well, we'll go on there. We'll go on with another half bag, maybe on all the ground in the next week to 10 days. You know, as soon as weather allows. Soil temperatures are not great yet. You know, they're still low enough. So
they're still around 6 or 7 degrees, I suppose.
Yeah.
But I think the weather is to pick up in the next week or that. So hopefully we'll see.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
That's good news.
So you'll be going out with the stuff now. Yeah, and I suppose, look, that's very good, Larry. So I suppose just in terms of for the rest of the year, is there any big plans on the farm, or is there anything that you might try and do differently even this year or next year? Is there any big ideas for the farm?
Well, I must say, and like most farmers, there's an air of excitement around this year because after a very tough 15 months into July, August of last year, you know, farmers needed a break, and it looks like this could be a good year financially. So that's a help in terms of broadening the mind on what the next investment is.
Yeah.
On my farm, I feel that I would need more calf space. So my plan this year, hopefully, is to build a calf shed and put in an automatic feeder to feed 140 calves or whatever, you know, because that just might streamline my business, you know, in terms of labour.
Yes.
So I just want to, you know, anything I can do that can save time. Anything that'll save 5 minutes, I'll pursue that, because 5 minutes every day is
huge.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah.
And look, you just touched on it there, labour, and it's something I actually wanted to talk to you about, because just talk us through kind of how you manage labour at this time of the year. You have 2 full-time staff, am I right in saying? Yes. And have you a relief milker, or what way do you work it?
We have. I have a Filipino chap who started with me after just before Christmas, and he's full-time with us. And then we have Joey Walsh, who's a local man, and he's milking the cows and doing, if we want him to do extra hours. So that's ideal, you know, that you have a bit of flexibility. And I'm away doing other things myself, so I need that extra help. I need to be able to go when I need to go. Yeah. So it's very helpful to have that in the springtime.
Yeah, very good. And we were kind of talking before there, Larry, there's a bit of uncertainty in the dairy industry at the minute, and we kind of touching on the banding and the nitrates derogation. I suppose just what does that mean for you and your farm? Yeah, well,
we're in band 3 here, so we have been affected, you know, with the type of cow we have. But I accepted that, and you know, I had to go and source extra land, you know, in order to litigate against that, which I did. And obviously, we went from 250 to 220, and let's just hope that, you know, we don't have to go any further on that, because the viability of the intergenerational farm, you know, comes into question. If you can't produce enough to produce more than one income on a farm, well, then there's no future for the next generation. So we have to be very careful as a country where we go and how far we push this, because we do need succession, and we do need the dairy industry. And we saw through the last recession how resilient that the dairy industry was and how it was able to contribute. You know, so it's really important that we don't turn our back on that as a country.
Yeah, it has to be a viable industry that provides for a family, like I suppose,
and the next generation's family as well. You know, that's really important that there is something to give that's worth giving.
Because at the end of the day, we're not working your standard 38-hour week, are we?
No, I don't know what that is.
I suppose, look, Larry, we'll leave it there. I just want to thank you very much for coming on to the podcast, and I want to wish you the very best of luck in the rest of the calving season and the rest of the season to follow, and hopefully everyone on the farm is safe and in good health.
Thanks, Hugh. And safety is really important, that we all get through and enjoy and have a good year financially. And, you know, we can enjoy that, and we should. We deserve it.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Larry. So that's all for this week's episode of The Dairy Trail. I'd like to thank Larry Hannon for coming on to the podcast, even though he was up to his eyes with work. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to rate and review, or share the podcast with a friend or a fellow farmer. Thanks very much for listening.